thank you everybody for attending this panel. My name is Emma Delage. I am the co-founder and CEO of Studio Camellia. Today we are going to be talking about, so it's a panel dedicated to publishing, but more precisely we are going to be talking about sourcing and the misunderstanding when you're a studio between you as a studio, an investor, and a publisher. So on my side, our studio is currently fundraising, so I will have the opportunity to ask some questions to our wonderful panel of speakers. So for today's session, I am surrounded by Marina Martellemi from Pix Capital, Mia Nilima from G-Round, and Andrea Kifu from ID at Xbox. So we are going to start. Marina, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to see you all. So I'm the co-founder of Pix Capital. It's a new equity investment fund based in Paris. So we are investing in early stage game studios, but also game technology company and gaming platforms, but mostly on content. So what we do is we take minority equity investments in company. We are a VC fund focused on seed and early stage investment in gaming. So typically we invest in companies that are pre-revenues, that for most of them don't have shipped even their first game. So this is where we specialize. So we are not a publisher and we are not a project fund as well. We are looking at being co-owners and shareholders of studios.
Thank you, Mia.
Hello, so I am the head of BizDev at G-Round, which is a playtesting service, also connected to Global Top Round, which does investments. Recently I came from Raw Fury, so a lot of my comments will also be from the publishing side.
Hi everyone, so I'm Andrea. I'm a senior strategic partner manager on the ID side, on Xbox. It is quite, I would say, versatile role. I'm looking for new opportunities on like different partnerships, also Game Pass related topics, marketing, commercial strategies with several of our partners. Beside that, I'm also partner co-founder in Bright Gamut, which is a project funding initiative, and doing here and there some small investments.
Awesome, thank you. So you may have heard, like we've mentioned a lot of different terms in order to describe a project funding opportunity. So there is an investor, there is a publisher, there is a platform. So can we maybe, in terms of introduction, like enumerate all the different types of funding that are available for a studio from the start to maybe later on? You want to start, Lena?
Of course. So I guess if you are starting the studio, the most natural avenue is first to go for love money for your friends and family to kind of put the starting capital to begin with on top of any unemployment aid that you might have, or also state funding. And especially in France, we have a very generous ecosystem that allows you through a number of multiple tax credits, but also government grants to really, I would say, fund potentially even a prototype of your game, depending on the scale and the scope. But if it's relatively modest prototype, I guess you can go still a long way with a number of government grants and starting capital that you may have accumulated or that is around you. Then, of course, as you move along and you become more and more ambitious, the number of ways you can fund yourselves are business angels, who generally, business angels are like institutional investors, like funds, but just in the way that they are private individuals, and so they will put amounts of their own personal money into the studio in order to have a share of the equity capital of the studio. And they can be small business angels that bring you potentially a lot of credibility or some expertise or some value added in a way or another, or they can be bigger business angels who put big tickets and also potentially some credibility. But depending on what you are looking for at the stage of development where you're at, it's up to you to strategize who you want to be able to help you in your next round of funding. Other avenues then are, of course, project funding funds, funds like Column Knights or others that act like investment funds, but at the project level. And also, of course, then as you move along and your project gets in better shape, you have publishers that all of you guys know about, and I will not expand because you are the experts, not me. And then you have funds, venture capital funds, private equity funds. And so these funds work in the way that they are equity investors in the company, but typically they kind of engage in studios at different levels of maturity. So whether you're at the seed stage or Series A, or you have shipped your first game, or you're at early access or even further along, you will not go and speak to the same VC funds. And you have some that are specialized in gaming, some that are specialized in tech, including gaming, others that are just generalist. And so then it's up to you to really strategize your milestone. Have I forgotten?
No, it's very, very detailed. And actually, it also depends on who you are. Maybe like if you've been like working in the industry for 30, 40 years, maybe you're going to have access to more funds compared to some other, juniors who just finish their school program and who are, starting to set up a studio.
And I forgot very important ones, of course, but corporates like NetEase and Tencent or Perfect World, who are, of course, people who finance games and who can work at financing games in the same way that a venture capitalist investor would. So these are, of course, a very important source of funding for gaming projects.
Okay, so we mentioned, love money, so money coming from your friends, family, an employment fund, if you're lucky to be in France and having worked for a few months. What else there is? We said the government grant, thanks to the CNC. We have then the platform funding. Maybe, Andrea, after you could say a few words. We have, project funding and also equity, which is more like, sharing, opening a part of your capital to a private investment firm. So maybe
if you want to talk about platform funding, which
platform
I
funding.
have very little knowledge about, like Game Pass deals and things like that.
I will definitely get into that. I think maybe we can mention also loans, just like bank loans.
From the bank, yeah.
Yes, that is part of it. In some countries, there are also other type of institutions providing loans. Then why not grants, government grants? But then there have been on the market also other type of grants, like Epic. They have been having for a while the Epic grants, and I know there are also other communities providing grants, and then indeed, like there are several opportunities on the platform side, on the Microsoft side, where everyone knows about Game Pass. It's a subscription service, and then if your game is eligible to enter the program, you would get a license fee, a fixed license fee. Then we have the Partner Acceleration Program, which is a program aimed to encourage diversity in the games industry. Diversity, accessibility, sustainability are different angles for it. And that comes with some monetary support as well. Occasionally, we have also porting and ID funds and opportunities. Now, of course, if you are bigger, then you can even do like publishing, collaboration also with the platforms. So this is only on the Microsoft side, but I know also PlayStation have similar programs, and others as well. So.
Thank you. And so we've listed a lot of potential opportunity to fund your project. But you cannot activate them all at the same time. Some of them you can activate them really from the early beginning, some others when you already have a prototype. So when is the right time to pitch according to a given partner, for instance? Can I Am I going to go to a publisher the same way I'm going to pitch a business angel? Like, what do I have to prepare? Like, what do they expect to see? Let's, like, if we start with, I don't know, a business angel, for instance. Who would like to take this? Mina? Yeah.
Happy to answer that from both the point of view of a business angel, having invested as one in a number of studios, and also from a VC fund. So, since I'm co-founding a VC fund that is focused on early stage, the criteria are likely to be relatively the same because I tend to invest at the same stage that business angels go for. So I would say that there are three things that we are looking for when we are evaluating a project. So there is the vision, the team, and potentially the prototype. And I guess that I can live with 2 out of 3 of these things that are solid and well thought out and well defined. But I mean, only 1 out of the 3 is really too much question mark for me. So I guess that if you would come to us at the stage where you want to have VC funding or even business angel funding, the way I would look at it would say, okay, is the team already there, or is it in good shape? Or if it's a solo founder, does he or she already have a vision for what the team will look like, or potentially talents that they know that if they approach them with the funding, they're likely to join the team? So who will be, because at that stage, if you make an error on one of the really key people who will be executing the vision, that can really set you back a number of months or even kill the project. So this is one of the very core pillars. The other one is the vision. And when I say the vision, is not only the vision for the game. As a VC investor or a business angel, I'm not investing in just a game, I'm investing in a studio. So it's mostly the vision for the company as well. Is of course, the first game that you are presenting is what you have best to show for what you want to do and achieve in the long run. But at the same time, I really want to know where you want to take the company for the next 5 to 7 years, which in general is my investment horizon as a VC fund. So it's both, okay, what do you want to achieve with that game, realistically enough? And then how do you use that game as a platform or a foundation to achieve something bigger in the future? And what's your long-term vision for the studio? Because I'm not just here for that game, I'm here for the second and third one, potentially, in terms of time frame. That I would look at it that way. So for me, it's as important what you plan to do with the studio as what you plan to do with the game. Because there can be one approach which is absolutely valid, which is to say, I want to make my dream game the best game of my life, but I only want it to be profitable enough that it allows me to make the next game. And because I have a very niche audience and I have a very maybe arty approach, and that can be a perfectly valid approach, but that is not venture capital compatible, because us, in order to see an exit and a trajectory, we want to invest in studios who want to build something for growth. So it's just a type of investment and a type of mindset also that we are looking for, that sometimes we see amazing studios, but they don't necessarily want to do that, and it's perfectly fine. So for me, the vision goes both ways, game and studio. And then the last thing is the prototype. And there, I guess everyone has their own appreciation. It can be a technical prototype, it can be a vertical slice. I guess if the team is very strong for me and the vision for the game and the studio is very strong, I can live with no prototype, or even a relatively basic technical prototype that shows what you want to demonstrate. And if maybe the team is a little bit less well-defined and the vision a little bit more unsure, then if the prototype is more solid, then it gives me more ground to invest. So it's always how many of these things can you give comfort to an investor on, so that they will go ahead knowing that, for me, these are the 3 pillars that I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Marina, you really stress something that is important to mention, is the fact that when you are pitching to a business angel or an investor, it's really pitching your studio and not only your game. So you need to think really long term and making sure that you can convince the people you have in front of you that yes, it's not only one game project that you're going to ship, but also many others. You mentioned something about the prototype. And actually, like, how do you know? Like, if you have the vision, if you have a team, you have a prototype, but it's very, very early. on my side, like we've always, like when we pitch to investors, like we're always like, yeah, we do have a prototype, but it's still early, you know, to be able to really show the vision for the game. So how can you be sure that what you're going to show is not going to, you know, come back at you because it was too early and people cannot, you know, project themselves into what you want to achieve?
I guess the way that you can think about the prototype is really focusing on the things that you want to demonstrate with it. You don't have to demonstrate all the little points that you want to convey through the game, because of course with the funding that you have at your disposal, it's something that you risk actually spending too much on your prototype and then detracting yourself from developing the game. But I guess it's really being very disciplined about knowing, okay, what do I want to demonstrate with my prototype? Is it, for example, if the biggest challenge facing the studio is something technical, then this is what you have to demonstrate in your prototype. And if the game design is relatively something that is already on track, or something that based itself on something that is already known and just not revolutionizing anything, but the challenge is technical, then this is what you should focus on your prototype, is really showing that you can address the very specific challenges that you are faced with this game. If the challenge is an artistic one, then the prototype should show that. If the challenge is the game design one, showing that these core mechanics that you are putting together potentially for the first time for a game can be fun, then you have to show that these mechanics indeed, when they are combined together, can be fun and work. And the technical aspect of it, you do something that can be thrown away, or you do something that is not really beautiful, doesn't matter. It's really
Execution,
judging, yeah, exactly. Judging what is the thing that you should demonstrate with the prototype, and just focusing in the prototype on that. And we know that other aspects of it will suffer. That's normal. You don't have enough money. You don't have the full team. It's okay.
Thank you.
Can I add?
Of course, yeah.
From the publisher side, what we usually want to see is the game loop. And then other things like art or something. Maybe it's just a part that is a little showing what you want to see, and you can put it into GIFs and things like this in the pitch deck to better show what you are creating.
Yeah, and here actually, yeah, we have a difference between, you know, what an investor may be looking for, like showing a proof of what you are saying, and also a publisher being more focused on what the game is about, like what can you deliver, the game loop, how fun it is. Do you want to elaborate on that, Mia?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we still look at the pitch like a business plan. You still want to show your studio and your experience, what you're bringing to the development. And I would also say that, we see a lot of the times, especially maybe if it's a student project, that people come in and they tell about the story of the game from start to finish, and there's not really that market research or due diligence done. So I would say this is super important when you go into pitch.
Yeah, so you come with the prototype or the vertical slice. Then you also need to come with a pitch that is going to describe what your game is about, but also the USPs, unique selling proposals. What do you expect to see, like in terms of market analysis? Because, well, a publisher is going on their side to also back up what is being said in the pitch. You know, you have some analysts in the team. So, what early work is the dev team supposed to provide for you to say, okay, I'm going to analyze that?
Yeah, I think we want to see that you have looked around at similar games. You have done a comparison, and you can tell us like, oh, this game is a little like this and a little like this one. So it doesn't have to be super detailed, but you should look at how much did these games that are similar, how much did they make, and you can base this on the Steam rating, reviews, and things like that. You can Google how to do it, and then make sure that the game you are making can, like this genre, can this make this amount of money? Because sometimes people come and they ask for a huge amount of money for, like, for example, a visual novel. And if you look at the genre and how much other games are made, it's not really realistic that a publisher would come in and put this amount of money on this kind of project. So this kind of market research you should really do before you have put a lot of time into your project, so that you know it's going to be worth it.
Thank you. Andrea, maybe do you want to add something either on the publisher side or also on the platform side?
Just going back to your question, like when is the right time to approach different partners, financing partners? From my experience, the easiest time is when you already have something outstanding that you are very comfortable with. So if you're at that point, you can just share behind closed door, and it's going to make it very easy for you. Or already build a name for yourself, for your game, on through marketing channels, and then I guarantee a lot of publishers and investors and funds and everyone is just going to queue in your inbox, and that is just much more easier for you. That is the ideal scenario. If you can get to that point, it's way easier. But other than that, I think depending on whom you ask, there are different answers. Like every publisher, every investor, every platform, they have different criteria, different way of working. Same on the platform side, depending on what your needs are. If it's just like, hey, I'm early on, I need some kind of capital to get started, some kind of funding, there are some opportunities. Then, if it's like go-to-market announcement, Game Pass things, there, that is going to be much later on during the development of the game. So I think it's more about like making a lot of research on your end, but doing that, in my perspective, it's a full-time job. So I'm not sure like how most of the developers succeed in it, because it is incredibly hard, and congratulations to all of you doing it. But it takes a lot of time and energy. So and then it's also the question like how do you know whom to research, because you cannot whom to reach out to, because you cannot reach out to like thousands of companies and ask each one of them. So like, oh, what are you looking for? When is the good time to reach out to you? What kind of things should I put in your deck? Because you want different things than others. So narrow that down. It's like maybe you want to work with publishers from your region or from your time zone. Maybe you need different kind of funding. And most important is to acknowledge that all these type of fundings that we mentioned, they are actually complementing each other. You don't have to go for only one or the other. Like start early on, start with a little bit of grants, start a little bit of like business, with angel investment. Don't go from the beginning and say like, I need 5 million, give me that, it's my first project with this team, never done a game before, give me 5 million, because it's gonna be very hard. Why not start with $50,000, make something, show something, and then go and ask for more and more.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned something, about like making all your research before that. So in other terms, like sometimes you read you need to show some traction, like being able, to leverage a community, to start having some conversation about the game. These are all like signals that you can point out, like to show that yes, you've been able to kind of create some communication around your games. There is also demonstrating that you can be business sassy. If I try to reformulate, like you've done your market research, and you are capable of having a business conversation and not only a game design conversation, because at the end of the day it's still a contract that you're about to sign. So that's also very important. I had a question actually. So you can be in touch with several partners. Sometimes you have a first meeting with them, you introduce them to the game. It goes a certain way. Maybe it was too early. Sometimes, like, can you get a second chance? Or do you, because sometimes, I'm trying to reach out to people and I'm like, is this the right time? Like, am I going to have another chance? Like, does this really exist? what about the first impression? Am I going to be, cataloged into, oh no, I'm not interested in that? Like, how do you come over this fear of, missing the opportunity?
So I think first impression definitely matters. It is there, and the key thing there is like standing out. Like we were talking before coming here, that when you go to conferences like this, or especially like GDC, Gamescom, there are partners, there are investors, publishers that meet with like 20 studios per day. I've been in that position, I'm still in that position. At the end of the day, I'll maybe remember like one or two of the games that I've seen. And, because we are humans, and, it is hard to cope with so much information. So it is on you to show me something that I will still remember, and I'm not gonna remember all the details. So like, don't even bother like putting everything in there. Show me something that I will take with me. And then, like, when I go home next week, it's like, that game, that is the one that maybe I want to follow up with first, because it's an opportunity out there.
Yeah, because most of the time it's like 30 minutes meeting, so you have to be really straight to the point, maybe having a, how do you call that, like a money shot that you can show so that people can remember. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But there is definitely second chances as well. We've had cases at Raw Fury where they maybe pitched too early, but they pitched again, maybe even a third time, and eventually we signed them. So for sure, like, it's also a bit about learning how to pitch. Like, you shouldn't be afraid to just go out there and start pitching, and because it takes time to get warm in your clothes. And then just, instead of maybe showing real gameplay on the laptop and things like that, where you can mess up or the build maybe didn't work, like have recorded 1 to 3 minutes of gameplay and things like that. So.
Yeah, live demos are no. Like you've seen some big mistakes or failures at E3. Well, it's the same when you are pitching a project. Sometimes you want to play live and the game is not working. Why? Why is that? Yeah. Marina, do you want to add something?
I guess on our side, there are definitely second chances as well, but it's all in the way that it's managed. There are two things that I might be looking at if looking at a project for the second or third time. The first thing is, how did the project progress in the time frame between the last time that I saw the team and this time? The biggest red flag for me is like 6 or 9 months have gone by and the prototype still looks the same. Then I'm just not interested. So it's showing how much progress has been done, if there has been feedback that has been taken into account, integrated. So that would be the first thing, is showing true progress, because then you can have a different conversation. You have new members to the team that maybe come to complete the team where you had some weaker aspect to the production, or you can show a better prototype, more advanced game, and so then we can revisit the conversation, as Mia was saying. The second thing is showing, as Emma was saying, some kind of scrappiness with the data and with the numbers, and being business-minded, showing, okay, you don't have a game that is live yet, so you don't have revenues. But despite that, you can still, very early on, try to have as much feedback as you can and try to rationalize as much as you can the potential traction of your game. For example, I've seen studios that they're not even in alpha. They've done more than 10 playtests already. They have more than 1,000 feedbacks logged of people who have played the game in a very early stage, but they are in this mindset of constantly testing. So even if they're not even in alpha, we already know that the engagement of the core players is good, that the feedback, the qualitative feedback are good. And so you don't necessarily need to be in the mobile world of 30 days, 60 days KPIs, even in the world of premium games, to be able to objectivize as much as you can the potential traction for your game. And as you go along in the development process, you will have something that's more and more robust, upon which you can try to gather that feedback and give a lot of substance to the business case that you are raising with the game. I've seen some people spending 10,000, 20,000 euros, but with these campaigns, being able to reach 100 influencers, having XK wish lists and potentially or doing some surveys. I mean, there can be very cost-effective ways to try to show potential investors and publishers that there is some interest. Not just saying we are doing a mix of that game and that game, it sells X copies, just believe me on my word. It's like, no, I already have proof that there is some interest for the game, and you have very, very good ways to do that, even with very little means. So I guess if you combine those two things, you can have 2-3 conversations about the game, and it's not just on the first impression, but it's really showing some novelty. And even in the world of premium games, even before monetization, that you can show some traction.
Yeah, so showing some traction, showing the progress you've made about the game, especially when you get a second chance, showing that you are listening to feedback and that you can improve the version of your game. Andrea, you mentioned something about, being the person who receives like 20 pitches a day. So as a studio, you have to make sure that you can be remembered by the person who is like sitting in front of you and who just wants to, get to the end of the day and have some rest. And how do you get reminded in their mind with that? But first of all, how do you reach this meeting? Actually, like, how do you find the people you want to pitch your game to?
It's getting hot in here with all these tricky questions. First of all, I think, of course, sometimes at the end of the day, we all just want to go and have a drink or, just chill and maybe have the meeting outside. But we are all in this industry because we are passionate about it. So we, most cases we enjoy all the meetings that we are in. And how to get in contact with for example, with us on the Xbox side. I think, there are several ways of doing it. You can go through LinkedIn and just find someone working at Xbox and reach out to them and say hey, I want to talk with someone about my game. And I think all of us, we are nice. I vet for all my colleagues there. And we're going to maybe put you in touch with the right person. But through ID, the way the program is set up is self-sufficient and empowering developers and publishers alike. And you can just register, you can submit the game, and you can say hey, I want this game to be considered for Game Pass, for the Partner Acceleration Program, or I have an announcement in 2 months. And just send an email to the email aliases that are available. They're in the back end, and we are going to have a look at it because we look at through all the games that come. Doesn't matter through which funnel they come through. Indeed, because we receive so many applications, so many games, maybe we are not always as fast as during the curation program process, and it takes time for some initiatives to get feedback more than the others, but everyone is assessed through the same lenses. So reach out to someone on at events like this. Everyone is very friendly in this industry, so nobody will say why do you come to talk to me? I'm yes, talk to me. Come on, let's talk.
So there are some platforms where you can submit your game to. But how about just finding somebody on LinkedIn and sending them a message? Does that really work? Do you already have this case of somebody you've never heard of or talked with who just comes at you on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to show you my game? How do you react? Even if it's not in your usual process, do you give them a chance? Or?
Well, I actually think that myself as a professional in the industry, if I have a LinkedIn account, it's as expected to get messages from people. I don't know about your experience.
Yeah, I think everyone tries to reply. Yeah. And also maybe come with instruction on how to submit the game to them. Yeah. However, I would say also it's really good if you send all of your material to a friend or something and ask them to look at this like it was Xbox or whatever.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there comes in material and there's a link that expired or things like this, and maybe they will not let you know. They will look at what else you sent that worked or something like that, and then will take the decision based on that. So they are not going to go back and forward for you to send more material.
Yeah, so when you have the email, really being like as precise and as detailed as you can be so that you don't waste a bullet, basically. Yeah.
I mean, to me, simply an introduction is worth 1,000 cold emails, honestly, because we are a small team. So when you're talking to a big team, they have juniors in their team who have time to go online, scout the project, and reply to inbound messages. We receive already so many inbound messages, and to me, one of the first ways that I screen is having an introduction. So I think one of the really smart things that you can do is, if you see that you have connections with someone you want to approach at a publisher or a fund, someone who can vouch for you. I mean, for me, one voice that it can be a founder of the studio who's talented and says, okay, I have seen this team, they're great guys, you should look at their project. It can be another potential co-investors, so from another fund or another business angel who says, I like this project, have you seen that? So in general, rather than just a cold email, if you can find a way to reach out to people by having an intro from someone who is ready to vouch for you, this will be so much more powerful. So sometimes this will be a way to stand out from the crowd, and when a VC or a publisher receives something from a trusted voice that says, take the time, look at this, I've looked at it myself, it's worth your time, they will put you at the top of the pile versus other people that will have project maybe as good as yours, but they don't have the intro. So we're all human and have limited time. So when there is someone else that we trust vouching for the project, we just go for the shortcut and we evaluate these projects first. So it's really a good homework to know, okay, these people, who do I have in my network who could help me reach out to them and maybe have my voices amplified through a qualitative introduction. For example, around us, we have publishers that we trust, we have other business angels that we trust. Whenever we receive something from them, we look at it straight away. And then the other projects go after that. So it's also a question of timing.
Could you share, like, on average, how many pitches you received, like, each week or each month? What's the amount, like, as a publisher? Or
Well, it can be hundreds sometimes, especially if it's around GDC.
Yeah.
So they can have a backlog of 300 pitches or something.
Yeah.
And maybe they give you 10 to 20 minutes at looking at your material before they take a decision.
Yeah, so you need to be really, like, straight to the point, very catchy. And actually, so when we went to GDC, I had this opportunity to, pitch some people I already knew beforehand. So that proved to be quite handy, because I didn't have to meet them again at San Francisco, because it was very busy, and so it was a gain of time. Some people we met at GDC were like, wow, that's awesome, we love your game, please send it as soon as possible so that we can review it. So you go back to, friends, you send them the build and everything as soon as possible, and then you wait a month maybe or so before having a feedback. So can you tell us more about what happens, when you are a publisher or when you're screening for a project and you are at GDC? Like, what's the process after that?
Yeah, so usually as soon as you receive the material and you start going through it, you want to play the build and things like that. And I think what takes time is just the backlog at all of the publishers, and around GDC especially. I think it can be super smart to pitch before GDC, like already like a few weeks before. If you know GDC is coming up, pitch 1 month before, maybe you can get a reply before GDC. And especially because all of the publishers, they are probably planned to sign something around then. Like they they know at GDC we're going to have a lot of pitches coming in. This is a perfect opportunity to sign the next project, for example. But yeah, you can expect it to take 2 to 4 weeks maybe before you get a reply.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then there is still this thing about like, are we ready enough? You know, like if like we're already targeting GDC, well, one more month before that, like, are we going to be even ready? You know, it's still always the same question. Like, is it too early? Like, what do I have to share? Yeah, so it's really important to make sure that what you share is something that is not going to cost you an opportunity, maybe because it could be misinterpreted or anything. Okay. And so there was another question we mentioned. So going back on the investment side of things. So let's say you manage to convince an investor. They're maybe interested in signing something with you. There is this question about valuating your company. Like, could you tell us more about like this process of giving a valuation for your studio when it's the first project of the studio, when you haven't shipped anything? Like, how do you get to evaluate your company and what it's worth?
So I guess the question of valuation, when you are pre-revenues, when you are even not far along the production of your first game, is mostly a question of negotiation in the end, and negotiating power. Because let's say you are a team of veterans, you already have a nice CV, you already demonstrated a lot of things, so the team factor from everything that you have, so from team vision and prototype, the team is very strong. So that is worth something. Like a team who has seniors, who has already shipped a game together, they have this experience, they've demonstrated that there is a good, efficient system for working together, that has value. So definitely that should be taken into account into the valuation. There is, of course, a discount to the valuation for a team that is starting to work for the first time together. So there is a big premium for teams that have already shipped games together, clearly. Then, of course, if you have a prototype, if your vision is very strong, that contributes to valuation. But in the end, whether it's worth 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, it's all a question of negotiation, but especially of strategizing your future rounds. So let's say that for your first round, you can't afford potentially to give up more than 25, 30% of your company in the first round, because how will you go all the way, you know, and finance the Series B and potentially Series C if you've already given up too much of your capital? So in the end, actually, that will come down to that, is, okay, in the long run, I will need these steps and these milestones potentially to do my first project, then I want to accelerate with the second one, potentially with another funding round in 2 years from now. So you already have to think in the long run and think, if I want to reach that point, how much of my company am I ready to give up today so that I'm not in a very uncomfortable position when I am 2, 3, 4 years from now and I get to the next funding round, and taking into account the great case scenario where you sell, when you make a huge commercial success, you sell heaps of your game, but also taking into account relatively conservative scenarios where potentially your game is not a hit, but at the same time you need to finance the second production, and then what could be the right conditions to do so. So it's also not give up too much of your company in the beginning, so try to be, to set yourself up for the right conditions, to be able to do 2 to 3 financing rounds in a good situation, bringing the value up from one milestone to the other, and strategizing what do you need to demonstrate at each milestone before you go for a fundraising, so that you're in the right conditions each time to potentially give up only 15, 20% of your equity at the same time, and then saying, how can I back up and give substance to the valuation that I'm aiming for? If I want to finance a project, so this is why, for example, if you're a new team and you've never shipped a game together, it's your first game, first studio, you want to fund a game that's more than 5 million worth, I mean, who is going to give you a valuation that allows you to have to raise the amount that you want at that valuation so that you don't give up too much of your equity. So it's also being smart about the budget of your first project, because all of these go together. If you go for, and if you're a very veteran team, maybe you don't care because you can raise 5 to 10 million on a great valuation because you've already demonstrated so much in the past and your track record gets valued in the value of the company. So that's really also something very strategic about what is the position you're in with regards to your project, the budget of your project, so that you have something that's viable in the long run.
Thank you. I'd also like to add another element. It's also the economy. People who've raised a couple of years ago have seen better valuation than what we can see at the moment. So just wanted to mention that.
Yes, absolutely. The context right now is really difficult. So valuations are a bit more conservative, that is for sure. But at the same time, I think that projects that have good substance to them really now are able to get out of the noise. There was a lot of background noise about some buzzwords and some people who are able to raise money maybe a little too easily. So I think right now it just erases some of the noise for some good quality projects to emerge and to still have the ability to fundraise in relatively good conditions.
Another thing you brought up, which was a good point, is that when you're about to release your first game, you should really have started pitching your second game a long time ago. So it's really important to have that plan of like what happens next and not search for the money when you need them.
Thank you. We're reaching the end of the session. Perhaps you have any final thing you'd like to add from this panel? Do you want to add something else that we haven't talked about yet?
Maybe one thing which I found really interesting was when you spoke about the data and the way that you think about the data for the market research. I think there are two things that can be useful when raising money about the data and market research. The first one is you can use the market data that you have at your disposal on how many copies other games have sold to kind of retro-engineer and have a reality check of how much you can afford your game to cost. Because you can maybe do the best horror game ever, but if it's going to cost you 5 million to make it, potentially, if you look at the average number of copies, not going for the exception, the average number of copies of very solid horror games have sold, but potentially you realize that there is a market cap to that, and so you can't afford to make that game for that budget. So it's also, I think, important to have a reality check on retro-engineering. How much can I afford on that game depending on the size of the market that I'm going for? And not just saying, oh, this has sold 300,000 copies, this one 1 million, this one 5 million. It's also a way for you to check whether your budget makes sense with regards to whether it's a very niche market, but that can be really profitable at the same time, if you make the right game for the right budget or not. And the second thing I would say about the data is that I feel that especially in the premium games universe, there is still a lot of room for learnings from what the mobile industry is doing. I think one of the great strengths of the mobile industry is that when they spend 1 cent or €1 in marketing, they clearly know how much that euro or that cent has generated in terms of views, in terms of engagement. And so I'd say that if you can have that approach as well, as much as possible, even in the world of premium games, of saying, I'm doing even very early audience targeting tests for my games, very, very early market traction tests, very, very preliminary, I would say, cohorts analysis, trying to emulate some of the testing practices and best practices from the mobile world, where they have a very rational approach about that, to try to show some KPIs very early on and try to substantiate the marketing, I think could be very helpful as well, even though we're doing some PC or console games where it's traditionally a bit harder to do that early on.
Thank you. All right. I guess that's the end. So we still have some time left for some questions. So if you do have some, please feel free to share them. You can ask them in French if you're not comfortable.
had a question on the more business angels side of the panel. I think you mentioned some amount of like mentorship coming along with the, and for example, can a business angel help you in the next round of fundraising? How does that work?
So a question about mentorship as a business angel, is that correct? Yeah.
So I guess there are two ways, I believe, two main categories of ways that a business angel or an equity investor in general can help you create value to reach the next milestone. A business angel, if they don't, so they could bring in big tickets, but on top of the finance side of things, could really bring you some expertise. So whether potentially you have a business angel who comes from the publishing side, they can open you doors with publishers, they can vouch for your project. If you have a business angel who comes maybe from the production side and is a veteran producer or game designer, they can clearly help you in their field of expertise, trying to help you refine your game and give you an outside view on where you are on the project. Because as you're working on the project and you're very dedicated, and you speak with them on an infrequent basis compared to your own regular team, then they will help you have also these reality checks on the direction that you are taking with regards to their own specialty. So it's having business angel is actually a good way of outsourcing some of the skills you need to your shareholders instead of the team. For example, if you don't have the money to hire a CFO at a very early stage, you can have a business angel who is very savvy in finance and can help you refine your business plan and just refine your vision and your vision for growth and for business planning, and you can brainstorm with them. So it's also thinking, okay, who can I afford, who can I not afford, and potentially the ones that I can't afford, I will try to find business angels who can help me just patch up my round, or one day I want to open this or that door. Okay, how can I think about people who will help me open those doors? So this can be the mentorship that they bring you, and I guess the second thing an investor can bring you is also helping you going for bigger investors at the next round. So a business angel will have limited financial capacity. They can help you in very early stage, but when you do a next round, becomes too big for them. But potentially they can't follow. But if they are well connected, they appreciate what you've built with the company, they're an insider. So they can go and talk to other investors and say, okay, I've been with that company for 2-3 years. They're great guys. They work well, have a lot of integrity. They're building a great studio, and they can open you other doors with bigger venture capitalists, bigger private equity funds potentially. And as I said before, this kind of intro is so much more valuable and will help you so much more because these guys say, okay, he's not just looking at the company for the first time, or she's not looking at the company for the first time. They've been with them for 2-3 years. So they've seen the good and the bad times. They've seen the good side of the management and also the maybe the not so good sides. So they've been along the road with them. And so potentially they have a good, knowledgeable way of assessing the studio, and that helps them in their due diligence, actually, to have these angels reach out to them and just help you in your next funding round.
Thank you.
I would quickly want to follow up on that. So a conversation that I like having both when I invested and when I've been raising is like talking with the team or with the investor and agreeing on like what is needed in the sense of like how many hours per year do you estimate that you need from that person. You know, try to be very realistic about it and see if they really have the time, because in fairness, like many investors, you know, they are investing in a lot of projects at the same time and say like, hey, I'm going to be there for you, but then you, especially if you're early on, you need a lot of, you know, might have a lot of questions, operational questions or so, and that is not something they might have the time with. So, you know, have like a very clear informal agreement of like how much of their time do you need. I know that when you are desperate for money, you know, you'll just take like anything, and then it's like, I'm gonna sort it later, like the mentorship and other type of help that I have. But if you can, you know, have that kind of an agreement. And then beside investor shareholders, there is also the board. You know, you can have in your board people that are not always investors in the company, but they are there to help you grow. And I recommend having a strong board, even if you sometimes have to pay for them. You know, they are, and when you pay for those hours, they are actually making the time to be there. Make them part of your journey.
Thank you. Another question?
Could that be more interesting to create representative visuals like screenshot or fake part of gameplay showing the vision, the artistic vision and gameplay vision of the game compared to a gameplay prototype which would be more advanced than representative visuals? So is it more interesting to focus the budget on those representative visuals that gives a clear vision of the style, maybe the gameplay or key features, compared to try to create a prototype and have all the technical aspects, which could be more complex with really short budgets? I know your opinion about that.
I can say from publishing side, yes. As long as you still can show the gameplay loop in a prototype, after the pitch meeting, we're gonna want, like if we're interested, we're gonna want to play it more. And if you can show the art style that you're going for, and you are sure that you're gonna be able to make that, or you have a plan for how to do it, then that can definitely complement the build or, things that are there right now.
Okay. So it's really interesting to also have a real gameplay playable. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Another question?
Hello. I'm wondering how should a studio approach equity funding as opposed to publisher funding? What does it achieve? What's the difference between having only publisher funding or a mix of both, or only equity funding? What are the advantages of having both, or just one of the two?
I mean, for equity funding versus publisher funding, so first of all, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? I think it depends really on your strategy. So let's say you have a game that has a substantial budget. If you want to finance the entirety of your production plus the marketing with the publisher, the terms that you get in the end and the revenue share that you will get will be, of course, a lot less favorable than if you only have to finance the marketing with the publisher and you're able to finance most of your production through your own means. So sometimes having a publisher finance a big chunk of the money that you need for your project is good, because you think, okay, I'm secured until the release of the game, but afterwards, if you can only get a share of your revenues that doesn't secure your cash for the next few years and doesn't allow you to really follow your ambitions, I guess it's a really important trade-off. So what you may want to do is to say, okay, if you feel that you want better terms for the revenue share that you want to extract from the game in the end, and you don't want to depend on the publisher too much, you can then go and say, I want to have in parallel some equity funding. And what I'm then able to do is to say, okay, I try to finance part or maybe most of my production through equity funding. So there I have investors who are here with me at the studio level for the long run. They're just here for the project, so also they don't have the same interest than the publishers in terms of the alignment of interest. And at the same time, say, okay, I secure part of my production with an equity fund or business angels. It allows me to have a better version of the game, to have something that's more robust. Then I can go and see publishers and be in a better position because I'm showing something that's more polished, more far along. And so I'm showing something better, so that I'm in a better negotiating position, because both my prototype is better, and second, I'm looking for less money. So with these two elements, I think you're able to extract a better deal for publishers, which means in the end, better rev share for you, which means in the long run, securing the perspectives of your studio. So, and at the same time, going 100% equity and no publisher this can also be a strategic decision, but you have to be careful about the battles that you want to fight. Meaning, if this is your first game and you already have to learn how to work together and ship a good game, this is already such a big challenge that maybe you don't want to try to self-publish for your first game, and you really need the support of a publisher because it's a specific job that they're bringing value. So it can be a mix of both, depending on the funding that you have, depending on the resources that you have internally. For example, going for self-publishing represents a lot in terms of building a marketing team and trying to rebuild a lot of things that publishers readily have. So, I mean, I've seen some situations that work really well with a mix of both strategizing, a mix of financing the production with equity and publisher, and really depends on your need, the size of the project. But I don't think it's necessarily an opposition between the two. I think they can work really well actually together because they will bring you very different things around the table.
Thank you. I think it's going to be the last question.
Thanks a lot for the panel. It was very useful. My question is about games that don't necessarily fit into the traditional premium models. How would you react to being approached for such pitches? I'm thinking, for example, free game or games that are free for users but distributed for premium to the public sector, serious games, games for impact, and things like that. Are they totally off the table for you, or how would you, react to that?
I think you really have to research then, like, who does these kind of games, because all publishers or investors, they have specifics that they are looking for, and maybe they are even letting you know on their websites and things like that. But otherwise, in conversations, maybe. So, yeah, some publishers don't do certain type of games, and it would just not be a value of your time to pitch to exactly them.
Something that I would consider is, can I scale, can I grow that game, can I bring it to all the mediums, to other platforms as well, because there is some revenue potential in selling it to an organization, to a school, or licensing that potential game, but it is also limited, so, and that might not make it as interesting for a funding institution, but, that particular game might be of interest also to a wider audience. So see if there is a business model to scale. Yeah. Otherwise, it's very niche. But there are some. I think there are some funding opportunities, grants, of course, first of all, but also some companies, publishers that really focus on it. Okay, this is the only thing we're doing. It's much smaller, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess having a more exotic business model adds another layer of difficulty. I'm not gonna lie. For me, if I'm seeing a game that really is out of what we know best in terms of business model that works, it adds another layer of difficulty. Especially, as Andrea said, in terms of scalability, especially as equity investors, we're looking for that scalability. So this is something that you would have to focus, is showing how can that business model or that different way of monetizing the game be actually scalable outside of the traditional models that we know. It can be absolutely possible, but you have to work even more on the business case to be able to convince investors.
Really quick, you also mentioned sustainability. Now platforms, this is a topic of interest for many players in the market, and they're willing to invest and support more of this type of games. But how can we adapt it, make sure it makes sense for everyone to distribute it through a new platform?
And something I wanted to mention is the impact funds. So there are many equity funds today that are branded impact funds. And so these guys, what they're doing is that they're not necessarily looking at the traditional KPIs to measure the performance of the project. So with them, you can have a more fluid conversations about exploring ways of measuring actually the real impact that the game will have. And potentially, they're not as focused on the immediate profitability of the game, and there might be more open about looking at other KPIs that might be translating the success of your endeavor or potentially more on the long term. So I guess targeting also the funds that you know have this angle can be a good use of your time as well. As Mia said, it's really doing more homework on that part.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Thank you everybody for attending, and thank you Marina, Mia, and Andrea for the great discussion.
Thank you.